Team A. He's based out of Worland with BLM. He's the one that nominated us for that pretty awesome BLM Leadership Award. So we are very lucky to have him. He was on this incident when they had all those big floods in Larimer County last year in September. And he's going to tell us all about it. So, Russell.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here. I've given not this presentation, but it's an ICS presentation before talking about all risk, and I kind of combined a couple different presentations. So it's my first time going through this one with folks, but I got a lot of cool pictures, and there'll be some things that I think that will obviously interest you from the weather perspective. You guys can make more sense of that end of it than I can. We dealt with the aftermath and the focus of getting everybody out safely and kind of trying to stabilize the area. I love this picture. You can really see just the individuals. You got the older rescuer up front that's just intent on getting them across, and obviously it's easy to see who's getting rescued. They look like they're about to die. And then the dude in the back's like, yeah, this is sweet.
Yes.
It's just interesting. You got a range of emotions there. Here shows and I had our GIS made this beautiful wall map. I'll give it to you. I was going to bring it and give it to you. That depicted this a little bit better on where the precip mainly was concentrated in the mountain ranges around and above Larimer County, which was where I was responsible for, which was the Estes Park, Loveland, Fort Collins. Not so much Greeley, that happened a little later when we were there, but and then there was another incident management team, Team B, that was there in Boulder, but I left that map rolled up in the corner of my office, and so I realized that when I was in the office. So.
I'll see you there on the 22nd.
Yeah, I'll make sure I get it to you. This just shows the event that took place, 18 total inches over a 3-day period, which obviously is pretty devastating to the area. They're calling it a 1,000-year event when we're up there. 1,500 homes were destroyed, 17,500 total damage, 8 confirmed deaths, over 18,000 persons accounted for when we started. 1,800, sorry, persons unaccounted for when we started. And that was a large process for us, as we had to confirm and clear every single structure that was in the damage area, and look at all the damaged debris areas to try and get that number down to 0 unaccounted for. 11,700 evacuated, 2,000 square miles affected in 17 counties. What I mainly, that included everybody that was in the other counties that were affected. All my experience was Larimer County, and the Boulder County had a little different experience, but for the most part it was the same thing. We had a little more difficult because they gave us the 911 services in the box, so I'll talk about that later. First responders, they did a very good job. They were well trained and equipped. They did hundreds of rescues before we got there, and then they just realized that all of their capacity was being overwhelmed by the 12th. One of the things that we really noticed is all of these isolated communities that had major damage to them in the canyons. It was an exercise in leadership of the communities, them pulling together, and everybody kind of rallied around the fire department, essentially, and they then kind of just started working with everybody and getting food and trying to think through the process of now what do we do. But they were able to call for help early once they got overwhelmed, and then that obviously is where we come in. We're able to come in as an incident management team, whether it's a fire, a flood, or any other incident, and share that burden that they're carrying alone. They obviously had other communities that they still have responsibility for fire and for medical and law enforcement. So we were able to take a part of that load off them so that they could continue to focus on those communities. There's some pictures of early rescues that were taking place, cars that were falling into the drainages, and you'll see some of the pictures before. A lot of these vehicles that were in the drainages were in parking lots or in garages along the river, and they just all washed out and into the stream. It's interesting to me how they, their processes, they train all this, and how they've got that all shored up. And yeah, what they could find. There's massive damage to the infrastructure. This was a big challenge for us also. As an incident management team, our primary focus is wildland fire. What we do is we bring the organizational skills to provide accountability to everybody that is affected, all the responders. And we surround ourselves then with people that are going to advise us on how to accomplish the mission that's in front of us. National Weather Service, for example, hydrologists, engineers, public health. We had veterinarians, doctors, structural engineers. We had the whole gamut there helping us out. When we started bringing together the affected parties, we have what we call our C&G, our Command and General Staff meeting, and then right after that we get together with all the affected parties, and we do that with wildfires too, but generally you'll have 15, 20 maybe at the top end on a wildfire, depending on its size. We were at 130 people, showed up to our first meeting, and we had a whiteboard, and we just wrote down every concern that they had. Need re-entry for gas lines, need re-entry for electrical, need to fly power line in such and such area for a cell phone tower on such and such mountain. So anyway, we had this laundry list of things that we needed to accomplish, and every day that's what we did, is just check things off. Homes and people isolated. No way or in or out of communities. So you have communities with thousands of people that they're healthy, they're fine, or they were at work that day and can't get back, and their kids were there with the nanny or babysitter or whatever other situation, and yeah, they really don't need to be evacuated because their house won't be threatened, but when's the next time you're going to get services to them? So that was a big fight for us too, is yeah, we know you're still mowing your lawn and things are well, but is it going to be okay 2 weeks from now? Is your child that's allergic to bees going to get stung? And then how you get them out? So a lot of educational process with that. It's just another community. You can see the river corridor there, so no access from the bottom or the top back into a lot of the communities. County response. The County Emergency Operations Center opened early, and then they had an all-hazard type 3 incident management team, and that was for Boulder. Larimer County did not. They were a type 2 team immediately. Single unified ICP to support individual commands. That was key. Anytime you get FEMA involved in our ICS process, they've adapted it somewhat to their needs, but we put our ICP where we had put it once before earlier in the season for a fire assignment, and we immediately realized that the footprint that we were going to need to house all the people and the infrastructure that we needed for this response, it was woefully inadequate. So in the middle of a rainstorm, we moved ICP to the ranch, and nobody wants to move ICP ever, because once you get it established, it's there. But we linked it up and we moved it out to the ranch, which is that quarter center that you see off the interstate there. And, it's the best thing that we could have done, because it put us all in one place and provided the necessary area for FEMA and us.
Was that a difficult decision to make because of what you just said, or did
Yes.
people realize, okay?
It was a difficult decision, and it's one that our logistics people were like, come on, we're fine. We can all bunk together, and I'll sit on your lap and sit on mine. There's enough room. But yeah, it was a good decision, and they recognized it down the road. And part of it is we weren't used to, when we call it urban search and rescue teams in, they've got a footprint like a normal ICP would be just themselves. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. The state response, obviously they immediately put together the National Guard and helped with the aviation and then also with the roads. So the other difficult part for us was even getting there. You know, I had to come down from Wyoming and try and get to ICP, and we went clear back over in eastern Colorado and back in, and finally got linked up with the National Guard checkpoint, and then were able to get to ICP. So some of the folks that were right there on the Front Range that were part of the incident management team, some of them it took 4 and 5 hours of just different roads and trying to figure out how to get hooked up. Our operations section chief was one of those. Air ground security forces, they had 400 personnel and 36 vehicles. The federal response, presidential major disaster declaration, it becomes a whole new thing when that happens for us. It's easier actually for us to function when that doesn't happen. But when it does, obviously that's when FEMA becomes involved, and they are a machine that needs to be fed information constantly. And they have processes, strict processes, that even though you're the incident management team that's in place there, they have their people embedded with you, giving you lots of instruction. And sometimes that's difficult. We do fires a lot. All summer long we respond. So as an incident management team, you're well oiled and you're able to function, and you kind of get a feel for the cooperators that you're working with. The sheriff for Larimer County, we knew him very well because of previous incidents. We knew their public affairs officer very well because of previous incidents, and then they give you guidance that you know is going to be contradictory to what the county wants, and ultimately that's the customer. So those are things that we had to work through and try and make work. So the FEMA, the urban search and rescue teams, they activated them in Nebraska, Utah. White IST is incident support team. It's like a fire incident management team, but they can't call it management. FEMA doesn't allow that. It's support. So they support counties and support folks. Missouri Task Force 1, Nevada Task Force 1. We had Missouri and Nevada in Larimer County. Utah and Nebraska were over in Boulder. Another one came later, but we were very lucky to get Missouri because those folks can barbecue like no man's business. So in the evenings, the caterer was hardly attended to because we were eating barbecue. And then in Boulder, this is what it looked like. Rocky Mountain Type 2 Incident Management Team B. Dan Dallas is the IC, still is this year. The FEMA White IST. The Army and Air National Guard, Boulder County Sheriff, Emergency Management, State and County, and FEMA Deputy FCO and IMAP. FEMA has 2 responses. They have the initial response and then they have the recovery. And that all kind of happens at the same time. And we didn't realize, I didn't, well, the whole team didn't realize it. It was a learning process for us to try and figure out their organization, how they function, and how to integrate them. But once again, that helped us in Learning County by bringing them into place. But also really helped is this FEMA White IST. The incident commander was very good, and he split half of his team, and they stayed in Boulder, and half came to us. And they cut through a lot of red tape with FEMA, plus they know their processes. So it was like having just an ace in the hole, so they could help us talk to the right people to make things happen through FEMA. So it worked out well. It started out rough with the sheriff. We're used to getting a delegation of authority when we show up, and that delegation of authority says, you know, this is the chunk of country I'm responsible for. I delegate you the authority to do these things here, whether it be spending money or ordering resources or whatever. And FEMA didn't like that. They didn't like us to have a delegation of authority. So when I got word back from some FEMA officials somewhere, I still don't know where they were at, saying, well, you can't have a delegation of authority. So I said, well, I already have. So right now I'm working for the sheriff. He goes, well, I'm paying for the bills. I said, well, you need to talk to the sheriff of Riverton County. And so I went and talked to the sheriff, and I told him, he's actually the undersheriff, Bill Nelson. I don't know if any of you know him, but he doesn't beat around the bush. He's a very good man, an honest man, but you know where he stands all the time. And I told him, I said, you know, they want to put us in a support role, kind of like their incident support team and not in the management. And I don't know how we're going to do that, because obviously we have the aviation expertise to handle this incident. So what do? I whisper into your ear, this is what you should do, and then you give the command to do it. And his words, I won't tell you his words, there's a lot of swear words, and he goes, well, why are you here then? I said, that's a very good question. So they went back to the state emergency management and was able to get clarified early stages that we were going to be in a management role, a command and control role that we're used to. Incident objectives: minimize risk to responders and the public, provide operational and logistical support to individuals, commands in affected area, prioritization, direct and supervise all SAR operations, support distribution of food and water, and coordinate and manage all aviation resources. The bottom one was a huge task because of the amount of aviation resources that we had. And then your box that we called it a box that we were operating in, essentially came down to the foothills of the Front Range. They could handle, because they had other routes that they were putting together, everything outside of the foothills into the flats over to Greeley, and then as this thing moved east, what they couldn't do was everything that was up in the mountains, including up to Estes Park. So we were given, I think it might be this, well, I'll get to it. Largest air rescue since Katrina, 21 military aircraft, 2,776 evacuated by airlift, 70 plus hoist rescues, hundreds of sorties, and no accidents. What I will say about our current capacity within our National Guard aircraft is that it is amazing, including our pilots. Obviously, there's been quite a few wars lately, so they are very experienced aviators. Years ago, when we called a National Guard ship up, there was always some concern, because I've seen them drag buckets into fences, slap the side of cars, just not as much experience as you would like. And there was so much experience there that our division supervisors were sometimes chewing their fingernails as they were landing sideways on a bridge with trees draped over it and power lines and certain things. But they did an amazing job and saved a lot of people because of how steady they were those hoist rescues in those canyons with those winds to hold that steady and bring folks in. Those helicopters is amazing. Okay, so this is back to the 911. That's the message that we had to get out, and that was one of the things that they delegated us to pull down, and we were like, holy cow. So everything within this box, we now have 911 authority for. What good does it do them to get a 911 call and they can't respond? So our operations section chief for the first 3 days had stacks of 911 calls. Get to it right now, get to it pretty soon, and
We have time.
yeah, Grandpa can wait for dog food. You know, it essentially went like that, and that was what we did for 3 days straight, was just getting on top of that and trying to figure out how, you know, we would get phone calls at 9 p.m., 76-year-old male on his last bottle of oxygen and has to have oxygen by tomorrow morning. Well, how do we get oxygen to this individual? How do we even find what his address is? It's, you know, it was monumental, but it really worked well because we had people already embedded in those communities. So a phone call to, or a radio call to one of our division supervisors who was in the community, he was already tied in with the local folks, and we were able to figure out, okay, this is where this individual lives. We were able to get, you know, prioritize our missions for our aviation assets. You know, lady needs to get out to continue chemotherapy treatment. Just on and on and on. It was like that. The only fatalities that happened during the air rescue part were 2 cats. We figured accident. We figured a couple things out. Dogs, they don't mind riding in helicopters. They might even think it's cool. I don't know, but they hang out. Cats, they do not like helicopters. And one was a hoist accident. They were hoisting a husband and a wife in, and the husband had the pet carrier with the cat in it, and the corners of it, instead of having the bolts or screws that you're used to, they were in a rush, the thing was apart, so he used bread ties, twisty ties, and they lasted until they were just coming in the helicopter, and then the bottom fell out of the pet carrier. So that was a 70 or 80 foot fall. The other one was an individual didn't have a pet carrier, and if you look at that blue, where those 4-wheelers are lined up in that Chinook helicopter, there's a ramp that comes up on the back of those Chinooks. Those are the 2-bladed ships up in the top center. And at the top of the ramp is a 2-foot opening. It doesn't close all the way. And they made it up to about 2,700 foot above ground level. Cat scratched the heck out of owner let cat go. Cat ran up ramp and jumped out the back of the Chinook. So that was number 2. Oops. Our turn back goals, once we started getting on top of all of the 911 calls and evacuation of people, we started talking about, okay, what are our goals? And all routes clear and passable. At that point, you know, we had 5% that were ready to go. All chapters successfully evacuated were 25% still to go, or were done, completed. Structures cleared 15%. So anyway, this percentage kept going up until we achieved that goal. When we first arrived, generally it's a 14-day assignment that we're looking at. When we first got there, the sheriff said, I hope you're willing to stay for, I think he said 2 months. And, holy cow. And it looked like that at first, but it came together a lot faster than we would think. And we were able to, with our organization, continue to meet with that stakeholders meeting, and a lot of those individuals had the information that we needed to help us already do our job, and which made this monumental task a lot easier. We had shot crews cutting logs and laying them in sinkholes just so we could get vehicles across, whatever it took to get to communities and or help to get people out. The first thing that is coming out of a mouth of an individual in the back country is, when can I get back in? And we were like, we don't care. We didn't say that. That's how we felt. We don't care. We just want to get you out. Later that will come, and the Forest Service had some big challenges on their hand, because how many national forests or other federal land, you know, that just willy-nilly cuts trees and starts throwing them on the road and cuts places out primitively so people can get back and forth. And obviously they had a big challenge on their hand, trying to balance that and make common sense decisions that also helped with, follow policy so that they could provide opportunity for people to get in and out of their communities. Working on all people out. Once again, we had a lot of people that wanted to shelter in place, and I have some numbers for you on that. We were reuniting families. When we brought people out and pets out, obviously we wanted to be able to have an accountability of who we brought out. So at the airport we had a checkpoint, and at the checkpoint was somebody to get all their information, their address, how many people were in the house, how many were out, how many were sheltered in place, if any. Do you have any pets up there? Did we get them out? And then also we had a doctor, several doctors, nurse there to check people out, and then we also had veterinarians there to check all their pets. And then working closely with Red Cross to provide a place where
Were you creating, I know the ICS has a lot of forms, but were you creating some of those things just on the fly, like get a spreadsheet, get this information, make copies, send it to the airport?
Yes, we were doing that, and obviously, it's still, that's what's great about the ICS, and that's what helped us as an incident management team, is we all have our processes, and we get put in situations that we're not very comfortable. This was very uncomfortable for all of us, but we were able to just grab onto that foundation, that firm foundation of the incident command system, and that helped us. We didn't stray from it. We maintained what we knew works, and you can, incident command structure, we could do the Tour de France. We could run that. We get the people there that we need, and we provide accountability, logistics support, ground support, plans, and the operations of the whole thing, finance also. So anyway, we really had to hold on to what we knew works, and that's the ICS system. Whereas when you do it normally on a fire or something that you're familiar with, it becomes second nature, and you don't even look behind you every once in a while to see how things are coming along. It's just march forward. So some refused to leave, and there was nothing we could do about it. If you look closely, you can see the bearded man in the bushes over there saying, "I'll need your help, fellers."
And if he doesn't leave, did you document at least like a
Yeah.
name or something from him?
Yeah, if they would give it to us.
Yeah, that was my next
There's some of the people that are in the backwoods, and you can, this gentleman here, one of them, that they don't, that's why they live there. I don't care that I now don't have a road. It's better probably. So there's 1,162 identified that we're going to shelter in place. That didn't want to leave. The part we struggled with that was, yeah, you don't want to leave now, but we are moving on then to help other communities. You were prioritized higher because of your location, and no food or water. We're moving on to those communities that are, gonna wanna need our help. Are you going to be a draw on our resources, 4 or 5 days later? We didn't quite say it like that, obviously, but obviously that's what we were thinking as an incident management team. We only have so many helicopters, we only have so much resources that we can spread around. We're here now, please take advantage of that. And we had some of that, but it turned out all right. 3,288 structures cleared. A big thing that we used the urban search and rescue teams was for that, and firefighters, red shot crews. And one of the things with FEMA is they're opposed to Mission Creep. And urban search and rescue, that's Mission Creep. A new term that we coined for them was mission evolution. We've got the people here. Our search and rescue part is over, but we still need this work done. Why would we ship them home and bring in somebody else to accomplish the same thing? So we were able to get that accomplished also. All the river valleys from stem to stern were checked, and especially debris piles. When they had the floods in Colorado, Big Thompson Canyon, years ago, that was one of the things that they didn't do a very good job of up front, and they found that that's where a lot of the missing people were, in the debris piles, and especially in the floodplain once it got out. And where some of the missing were found were kind of those same areas this time, so we had learned from some of their previous mistakes.
Did you find any alive?
No, not those. Those that went in didn't come back out of the river. A lot arrived, in some of the cars early on, and then some isolated, islands, essentially where roads were taken out. They were in between, but for the most part, if they went in the river, it didn't turn out well. There was one looter later that went in the river, evading the police, and he got out. We didn't know that he got out, but they caught him the next night in the same area, so it wasn't a very smart looter.
HR is,
I'm just thinking, I saw that and like, yes, thank you. Human remains. And once again, most of that was in debris piles way downriver in the floodplain, kind of as it settled out.
That one's strapped shut.
Yes, maybe they said, here, use my duct tape. That's a Black Hawk helicopter there. We had 200 and, I think it was 22 bunnies in one of those. We found a bunny lady that lived with him in her house, and
Probably started with two.
it was horrible. And they found her just there's aliens involved in her bunnies. I knew that part. But she went to be evaluated and admitted, and her bunnies. Some had to be euthanized, but most of them were put up for adoption. Yeah, she had a house full of bunnies.
Wow.
Alive and dead, so it was horrible.
People who grow up in Colorado.
You would think that, like this picture, you see these kids, and I'll show you a slide later on. You'd think that, the parents are pretty traumatized, and the kids, I'm sure some of them were, had some issues that concerned them, but found overall that they're very resilient, and actually thought that this whole process was pretty dang cool.
I got to wear one of those.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes.
Picture of veterinary services as we brought all the animals in. They did wellness checks for them. And, one of the big things that happened with Katrina that FEMA found was not well received is they left pets and they just focused on people, and the outcry that happened from that. They don't do that anymore, but FEMA we were doing it anyway. I mean, our folks were knee deep in mud bogs, herding horses downriver. It was, they all have some stories. Med check and accountability, I talked about that, medical services that we had. Obviously, when they first did a few evacuations, they were just going from house to house in the community, and they didn't take the time, so then we didn't know who was already out, which made it more difficult for us when we made re-entry to say, you know, Mary, John, and Frank, they left 2 days ago. So that's a process that we set up right away to help us get to that monumental list of over 1,000 people unaccounted for, to get that down to 0, whether dead or alive. Food and water. Obviously, logistically, it was a big challenge, and it's always good to have the local community, and there's national organizations that step up to help us with that process, so we can continue to focus on the responsible part of things. FEMA Corps, it's I believe they're volunteers, and that's something that they do is at all the shelters to have those that have had damaged homes or been displaced to sign up with the FEMA Corps. They're all college-age kids that came, and they all had laptops, or iPads, I mean, and get everybody signed up, or at least show them the process. There was a ton of these folks running around. Transport and shelter. As you can imagine, it's just a big machine that we had to ramp up to handle all of it. Urban search and rescue, this is the documentation by them, exactly what they did. And this is something that we had to evolve a little bit because they didn't do a lot of this, but the type of structures, the damage to the structure, survivor status, evacuated shelter in place, and human remains. And then one of the things that we were surprised at as an incident management team is we were getting calls from agencies in Washington, D.C. that had satellite imagery for us and exactly what houses were already affected. Like, why don't we ever get this on fires? It's some amazing things that they can do, and it was helpful for us to kind of focus in on some areas that we had no idea were affected that bad. Helped us clue into some of those areas that were isolated that we didn't think were, and helped us get there in not a timely fashion, but we got there. And it caused some heartache with some of those folks. You know, where were you? You know, several days ago. Oh, I didn't know you were here. So, data collection. Part of our problems in incident management team is we had fire folks using what they normally use for data, USAR using their stuff, and then bringing that back to our GIS people. Our GIS folks worked tirelessly, night and day, getting the information put on maps for thoughts, field going folks the next day. It was very difficult to do that. So that's something that we, as an incident management team, we're going to do differently, is make sure that everybody follows a single data standard, which will be our team standard, and make sure we get that information out. And everybody, and once again, the users of that data, in an instance like this, it was a ferocious appetite for it, especially through FEMA. We have a process where we do a 209, it's a form number, and that's where we feed our information up to the dispatch center. That gets fed out nationally, and anybody that wants to can view that information. FEMA had a separate form that we never filled out before, and it was a beast. So now we have one form between FEMA, because of this incident, one form between FEMA and NIFC, National Emergency Fire Center, so that we just fill out that one form and it gives them all the information that they need. One of the things I'll mention that was a huge challenge too was we've spent maybe billions of dollars in Project 25, which after 9/11 they found out that our communication systems weren't interoperable. So you had responders that were showing up that couldn't talk to other responders. And what we found since then is it's not gotten any better. Yeah, everybody has fancy new radios, but they still can't talk to one another. So Urban Search and Rescue, they show up and they're on UHF frequencies, and we are on VHF frequencies, narrowband or digital, depending on who. And then the local, some of the local responders were on 800 megahertz, and then you had the helicopters from the National Guard that could talk to us and our helicopters, but then we also had active duty out of Fort Carson, the Army, and they had helicopters that weren't equipped with, I can't even remember which radio they needed. So it was quite the task. So what we would do is we would send our fire folk, we ordered NIFC repeater kits, we set the whole grid up off our VHF like we normally would do, and then we made sure that they kept their radios, but then we had embedded with them a fire leadership type person that could communicate back to ICP. So we still maintain that communication, but it was frustrating to me that it was like that. So the successes is that the benefit to me was we had Team B was right here. They were a day ahead of us in their processes, and us over here in Larimer County, and we could make that phone call and say, or they made a phone call to us and said, heads up, here's some half-baked idea that we just had to fight off. I'm sure it's headed your way, and it would be, but it would give us that time to fight through it. We were told at times that, you know, I would get a phone call 30 seconds before I'm going into a public meeting that says you cannot say this, or this to the public. And I told them, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about two of those things. You told me I couldn't because they deserve that. Well, how do you know your information is correct? Because we're being fed that from our folks who are on the ground, which you're not in that loop. And if you're going to give me direction like this 30 seconds from now, then it better not be because you're sitting in Denver, but you're sitting right here in the bus with me, helping me, you know, whether I take left or right. And we worked through those things, and it was uncomfortable at times, but overall, there's a lot of lessons learned. And FEMA is going to use this as a model in the future. Many of our incident management teams, when they say FEMA and they talk about their previous experiences, they didn't feel like they had meaningful assignments. Whether it be Katrina or 9/11 or wherever, the response has been difficult, and sometimes they're handing out bottled water instead of working on a big picture issue that needs to be taken care of. And to FEMA's credit, they're trying to learn from these mistakes, and they sent out a lessons learned review team to this incident, sat down with us and wanted our candid feedback, and they got it. And so now things are changing that will help other future teams and FEMA to better respond in the future. The other thing that helped was the relationships that are made need to happen prior to an incident like this. And the benefit for us as an incident management team is that those counties that had the Hyde Park fire, that had that one that was above Boulder that that was started by the state. And they'd had, you know, a lot of those things that our incident management teams have responded to, and luckily, we'd had good positive relationships through those incidents. So they wanted to see us back. And that helped it head in the right direction. Motivated, well-trained responders, and that attitude, which to me goes into the egos. It was everybody wanted to work towards a common good, and there were things, you know, when you bring in an urban search and rescue team, your local search and rescue team's like, hey, you know, we're not good enough. That wasn't the case. There were, you know, we treaded lightly on some of those things because we recognized that that could be a problem, but they realized too that the enormity of what was in front of them was going to be a challenge. So they were willing to accept those and to help. And so often what we did is we embedded their folks, 2 or 3 of them, with the larger urban search and rescue team, and they said, hey, you know, we know the country, which they did, and people, which they did, and we were able to make those partnerships work. And oftentimes there's a very small line between confidence and arrogance, and I think that confidence was there, the arrogance wasn't, and that helps. It doesn't matter how good you are at your job or what you do as an individual. If you are arrogant, that's what they remember. They don't remember the fact that you accomplished a lot and did a lot of good things. They're going to remember just that part, which unfortunately is the arrogance. And you know, from the sheriff on down, we fed them information. They provided that information to the public. We had to make sure that we were all on the same page. We couldn't have 42 missing, and then I'm saying 36 missing. That number had to be exact each time, or the media would teach you live. And I was in front of a camera 2 times a day, every day, for 9 days straight, including national media. So that all helped. That you've got FEMA representative standing there, the sheriff standing there, me standing there, and this exact same message is coming from all 3 of us. It helps everybody in general. Of course, the sheriff has got constituents and is an elected official, so he would spend quite a bit of time on that part of things, and I spent my time on facts and exactly what we were trying to accomplish each day, which switched from day to day, and the challenges that we were facing. And then, and of course, they send whoever they need to. I'm sure if I was a female IC that they would send their most handsome, buff man to interview you, but they sent their most beautiful, tight, mini-skirted girl. What would it take for me to get a ride in a helicopter and video some of this? Nothing. You're not going to. We're picking people up. We're not going to waste your time with crap like that. She didn't talk to me for the rest of the assignment, which was good. But it's something that we always had to watch, because they would go, if they could, behind areas that they weren't supposed to, and potentially get themselves in danger. And also with their aviation assets, you've got 22 helicopters flying in and out of tight canyons. We had air attack platforms up above them that was coordinating all the airspace in and out. You couldn't have any time for any of that silliness, and so it's something that we really had to watch. You guys have any questions? I have one more picture that I want to show you. These 2 fellas right here. Their mom, they were in a neighbor's, because their mom had to run out of town, and then in that time period lost access. So they were away from their mom for several days, which obviously mom was very concerned about. And we were able to, you know, in the prioritization of things, get in and get these 2 little fellers out. And this was later in the incident, so they took the time to get him a flight suit, and some of the things that we do, we've got, you know, processes that we hold tight to in fire for PPE, and it's hard to break that. We don't need to have 52 people that we're putting in a Chinook all with PPE, and it's hard to get over at the beginning. Is telling the aviation guys, you know what, that can't happen. We've got 2,000 people we still gotta get out of this place. Let's load them up and get them back. So these two got to get their flight suits and flight gloves and flight helmets, and they showed up with those grins. Mom thought, oh, my poor kids, they're traumatized, and this is what they got. And so one of our operations chiefs, he personally went up there at the time and was the one that, you know, brought him back in, and was visiting with the mom, and a school bus come up to pick him up to take him to the shelter. And as the oldest one was getting on, Mom, this is sweet. We got to ride on a helicopter, now we get to ride on a school bus. So they'll remember that forever. Do you have any questions for me?
How often did you debrief? Is that daily?
Yes. Our planning cycle and or period, our day started at the very morning at 6 o'clock is when we did our briefing for all the resources that were going to go out in the field. You couldn't fit all the USAR people in there, so their leadership would be at that briefing, then they would go brief their individual USAR teams.
Was it 24 operations, 24-hour operations, or?
Yes,
did you-
it started out that way, and then
Uh-huh.
once the 911 was on top of that, we were able to slow down. But yes, it was 24 hours. So at 6 o'clock was the morning briefing for that day's operational period. And then after that, we would go into the 9 o'clock command and general staff, and our stakeholders meeting would happen after that. We had a media briefing in mid-morning and then evening, and then just the hectic for the day. And so for the 24-hour operations, at 5 o'clock, we would have the briefing for the night operations section, to get those folks ready to go out in the field, and they'd head out at about 8 p.m. and then go again till the next morning till 8 a.m. And so that's kind of how it happened. And then as operations folks would come off the hill, if they came off the hill each evening or day, whenever they were coming off the hill, they'd meet with the operations section chief and talk about their day, their challenges, things that they foresaw would bite them in the future if they didn't get a handle on it. Close the loop on things that they were given that day. And I can tell you, it's interesting to sit in a room with those individuals, and some of our folks are just wired really tight, and processes what they really hold on to, and you need to have some of that, but then also in an incident like this, you've got to kind of roll with the punches a little bit, and that group was the perfect group for that. Operations would give them a stack of 911 sheets, and this is in your division. You've got to take care of this today, and who knows when it was in there. I mean, there's all sorts of things that challenged them each day. They said, all right, and figured a way to get it done, and you know, some of that was, you know, grabbing a four-wheeler that was in the stream bed that had the keys still in it, and running up the road to find the house or whatever it took to.
After a major issue like that, and there's a lot of, like, you know, dramatization, do you have like psychological, like, you know, help and
Critical
stuff?
incident. We have critical incident stress teams, CISM teams that we call them, that we call in, and the part that we tried to isolate was the body recovery part. We left to those that were used to that. Our fire folks hung back so that they wouldn't run into things like that. It was talked about a lot to folks if they thought that they needed that, but for the most part, the overall response was very positive. You know, there wasn't a bunch of death, and in the early stages, you know, a lot of of that number of 8 that we saw were found, and then in the very later stages, they were found. So everything in the middle, it was just joyous because of the over 1,000 people that were unaccounted for every day. That number would go way down, and they were all fine. They were at Aunt Mary's in downtown Denver because they found a way out, or were brought out earlier and weren't accounted for. So, or had went into town to get whatever. And then
So
didn't get
most
back
of the
down. So,
unaccounted for were found alive?
yes, it was just only 8 of that whole, and that was the whole
Oh,
incident.
wow.
Total that were
Uh-huh.
fatalities, so. Yeah. But yes, that is and sometimes we have to do that. We had an incident, the Big Meadow fire that happened on
It was
Rocky Mountain National Park.
like a third week in June, something like that.
We had a hot shot crew member have a heart attack on the line, and they went through 3 rotations of CPR and nothing. Got an AED up there and was able to bring him back, but obviously it was a very traumatic thing for the hot shot crew that was up there, and also the sister crew. So we had a SISM team come in to help with that response too. Dave was up there doing our fire later for us.
Interesting assignment.
What's that?
That was an interesting assignment.
Yes.
Snow on the ground, but the fire was in the trees at the same time.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Any other questions?
I think one of the things that we've been stressing here is incident command system. We've been talking about that you said you could run the Tour de France, but you can also run the weather office with that. When you have you said sometimes it gets in the back of your head, that, well, it's behind me, I'm already doing this, but you're still operating in that structure.
Yes.
The whole time. It's something we've been trying to stress here because you can expand and contract accordingly and push people in. Can you speak at all to how that changes within something this large versus a smaller fire versus what you might even do on a very small prescribed burn?
Yes. We have several sizes of incidents, all the way from your single tree fires, your type 5, and that's going to be your IC and whatever resources are there. That's the fledgling start of your incident command system right there, is that small of an organization. A type 4 maybe 20 and 30 acres, maybe bigger, maybe smaller, depending on what field type it is and the duration it's going to last. And you may have an operations person under you, the IC, and a little logistical support, because obviously you're going to be there a few more days, so you're going to get sick and tired of the MREs after a little bit, and you're going to need batteries and fuel and whatever else out to the incident. So you just ramp up in size, and when you do fires, larger fires, our incident management team, Rocky Mountain Team A, can go as a short team, which is 9 people, and obviously the 9 people are just the overhead structure of the IC, logistics, finance, plans. Then you're going to have your operations, 2 of those, and then your divisions, and that's it. And that's how you roll.